Um, the digital mailroom, it means many things to many people, but in really simple terms, a core system will allow you to capture information. It will help you to understand content, and it will help you to deliver that content into wherever it needs to be. It might be document management, it might be other processes, it might be into the hands of people. So first of all, looking at capture, I'm sure an awful lot of you will have the impression that a digital mailroom is perhaps a glorified way of scan to email, of taking physical post and moving it around the business. Really what's happened over the last 2 or 3 years is that the contemporary digital mailroom is not just looking at scanning post, it's dealing with managing a consistent process and helping information get to the right people at the right time. So typically our digital mailrooms will start around a post scanning pilot, but will quickly include both fax and email inputs as well, especially where they're very structured inputs, for instance, case-related work, conveyancing, perhaps invoice processing. And as a business, most of the correspondence that we get would fit into the email bracket, where our clients, or our suppliers and clients and outward partners would send us things by email simply because it's cheaper and quicker, but we still need to handle those when they come back in. And I've been into many business where they will take incoming fax, especially fax to email, and incoming emails, only to print those out, to scan them in, to move them around their business, which would seem bonkers, but it's real. A really important part of the digital mailroom is not so much the scanning piece or the capture piece, because in the grand scheme of things that's quite a trivial component. The real power comes in the analysis of content, classifying documents as to what type of a document they are, which area of your business should this document go, and extracting specific data. So you might have standard forms, you might have incoming invoices. You're not really paying your staff to deal with that document. You're paying your staff to deal with that data, because that's what matters. And lastly, delivery. When we understand the context of a document and the information contained within it, we can send that to where it needs to be. And sometimes that's the bin. We have spam filters on our incoming mail and our incoming emails to get rid of things that shouldn't trouble us in the first place. At the same time, we have some documents that pass straight through our business and out to a supplier. We might have orders for a scanner, for instance, and that order will actually bypass us completely, go to our supplier who fulfill that scanner or fulfill that order, and they'll send us an invoice. And it's when the invoice comes into us that we pay particular interest to the paper. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you a piece of software called Abby FlexiCapture. To give some credibility to Abby, they're a business who've been around for a long time. Their OCR software, their reading software, if you like, forms the backbone to about 60% of everything. So people may have heard of bits of software like Kofax, for instance. Kofax is ubiquitous in the mailroom, and it uses Abby technology at the heart of it to read content. So whilst I'm showing you Abby FlexiCapture, I'm doing so because it's an interesting vehicle for a demonstration, but there is no one-size-fits-all to software, and we work with a number of suppliers to deliver solutions which fit the need rather than making the customer fit the solution. So Abby FlexiCapture at the moment is running on my laptop, and that's probably the smallest installation in the world, and the largest installation in the world is with a very large German car manufacturer, and they process 65,000 pages of content through the same mailroom structure that you're going to see. They process 65,000 pages of content every hour of the day for every day of the year for 365 days a year. And to help you understand just how much that is, that's roughly the height of 6 people running through their system every hour. So if you were to stack that paper up. What I've done here is I've simulated having scanned a batch of documents. I've simulated it because the mechanism of scanning itself is relatively dull, but I've got a mixed batch here of invoices, of standard forms, of letters, insurance documents, the kind of stuff that comes into our own business. And I have a separate batch here of letters where one of the most important systems we've ever delivered was into a business where they needed to react or wanted to react very quickly to customer complaints, criticisms, and compliments coming into the business. They're an enormous business, and it was important to them to make sure the right people saw these things at the right time, because a complaint dealt with swiftly was a complaint that generally turned back into a sale. So I've got here some examples of letters, and they're completely unstructured. I'll show you later how that's going to work. But we have a complaint. I think if I were to zoom this in, we have someone livid about the shoes they bought. And we have change of address, a regular case-based boring process letter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to send these 2 batches into Abby in the background. I've already sent that this morning while I practiced, because I'm diligent. And in the true Blue Peter style, here's one that I prepared earlier. So your scanning room or your scanning operation, it might be central, it might be distributed, it might be something that just happens in all the offices. Generally, you would create a role in your business, being that of verifying and processing post-room content. In some of the law firms that we deal with, that becomes a team secretary job. So we very quickly work out where posts should be delivered in a team sense, and then get the person closest to that team to deal with it. That's what I'm going to do here. And I can see through this software that I've got 2 tasks waiting for me for verification. If I were to get this first task, I can see a bunch of documents that have come in, and I'll explain how this works shortly. But I can see I've got a standard form of a 1040, and I've got a generic document type of document where it's understood the class of document and normally therefore the team that something should have gone to. When we look at that 1040 document, I've used this standard American document as a good example of a handwritten standard document. And often what we'll be doing is we'll be looking at things like a matter reference or a customer reference number or an order number in order not just to route the document, but to talk to your business systems and work out who this should be for, why have we received this document, and who should be told. This is read, this handwriting, and I can see that it's got a letter wrong at the end. So I'm going to verify that. And I'm going to ask Abby to take me to the next thing that it thinks need my attention. So in amongst hundreds of documents, what this does is it boils the effort down so that your staff, your operators, are only asked to deal with the things that are considered to be important. In this case, a couple of mistakes in reading handwriting. So what I could do now is I could close this task, and those, there's interesting, it's telling me, that's it, that I haven't actually verified that name. Thank you, Abby, for holding my back and drawing my attention to the important stuff. So if I were to close this task now, those documents would go on to be delivered to whoever they should be delivered to. If I go in here now, I'm just going to show you quickly that I've got 9 letters that are loaded in. They're the same letters that you saw before. And all that's happened here is that we've identified this as a positive letter. I'm checking very quickly that my Blue Peter job has made sure that all the positive letters are actually positive. I'm happy with that. And I'm going to brace myself and go on to the complaints. And what's happened in the background is that Abby has used previous examples that we've given it, where we can create a bundle of 100 documents and say these 100 are all letters where the person was pretty cross. I'd like you to learn from that the words and phrases that people use when they're cross, and likewise the words and phrases and terms that people use when they're not and when they just want to change their address. And I'll show you where computers still need humans in a moment, because that's really, really important. But again, once we've finished this, if my job as an operator was simply to confirm that these documents were actually letters and they were a change of address, I can now close that task and those documents are sent off for processing. If I switch now to a tool that the administrators in conjunction with us would use to teach this system how to operate. We delivered a mailroom into a conveyancing business about 18 months ago, and in the conveyancing workflow, in a standard workflow, there's about 80 or 90 distinct document classifications, and the client in that case had 30 staff working in their team. They ended up spending around £150,000 on their mailroom, all told, but after they'd signed up with us and agreed to pay that much money, they said, haha, we've worked out that we've got a 4 to 5 month payback on this, because they'd landed an enormous new contract, which was going to mean a load of new cases coming through and would have meant them hiring another 10 or so staff. And so what we delivered to them was a mailroom which enabled the same 30 staff to process roughly twice as many cases as were done before. And I mention that because in this particular case, with the 80 or 90 document types that were classified, it was a big exercise both on their part and ours to gather example documents, to work out what those documents are or what they meant, and then to teach the previous version of Abby, which didn't have any of these fancy new tools, to teach that how to read those documents, typically by saying, I'd like you to look for these specific bits of text that I'm going to tell you about now in this specific area. So for instance, I can see the corporation tax document in front of me. I might well have said it should say HM Revenue and Customs in the top left corner, and it should say company tax return, notice to deliver a company tax return in the top right. And from that, it would have been easy for me to tell that that was a corporation tax return request. The tool that we have now would take that same exercise that was many, many days and shrink that down to probably 2 or 3 days of effort on our time, and maybe 2 or 3 on the part of the customer in gathering example documents. So what I've done here is I have a folder full of unclassified documents. I know what they are, but Abby doesn't yet. So I'm going to take that folder full of documents. If I open it and I start my classification, it's that quick. Abby has just processed about 10, 20 pages, 20 pages, I think, of content, and it can see an NatWest savings account of mine. Don't look too hard. And I'm going to tell Abby that I know you recognize that there are 2 documents in here. They're broadly similar. As I click between them, there's very little difference. And what Abby's done, if you can imagine, is stand in an office in your own premises, maybe 30 foot long. And if you asked one of your members of staff to pin on the opposite wall with blue tack the front page of each piece of post, from 30 yards away, you could probably still tell that this was a bank statement or a NatWest statement. But more to the point, you might not be able to tell what it is, but you could tell that it was the same as the one that was right next to it. So I'm going to help Abby out here, and I'm just going to call this bank. I'm going to flick to a bank account statement from Barclays. And this statement has some features. It's got the Barclays logo. It says current account statement. It's not quite the same as this one, but it's pretty similar. So again, I'm going to help Abby out. I'm just going to say that this is bank. Here's another account or another statement much earlier, back in 2001, but this bank statement does look pretty different to the other one. The logo hasn't got the wings, but I can still say to Abby, do you know what? That's bank. And typically what we do is sit down with you and just throw a month's worth of post into the system and do this exercise where we can say, what is each one? What Abby's done here that you might not notice is that it's found 2 documents that it believes are the same. If I were to close this for a moment, I'd be able to show you up here. It's found 2 that it's clustered together and it believes are the same. The rest of them it just has 1. In reality, when we process the post for a conveyancing business, again, it's a good example because everyone knows about it. If you process 200 cases a month, it would be very likely that you would cluster 200 energy performance certificates and 200 TR1s from the land registry. So what we are doing here is we're simply telling Abby, you don't need to really understand what's in this document, but I'm telling you that if you see one of these, it would be a marriage certificate. And on and on and on. What we do next is we use a tool to help train the actual engine that Abby's going to use to say, if I were to load a bunch of these documents, that thing that I called an EPC, you should remember that now as an EPC. When you see one, you should say that that's an energy performance certificate. And we can bring various documents in here. Here are the same documents that we did before. And if I were to classify those documents, at the moment they're all unclassified because I haven't yet told the core post room what's going on. But it's as easy as saying, actually, I'd like to have a document type of bank to match the name I gave it before. Oh, because bank already exists. I'm sorry, people. All I would do then is go and say these things should be considered to be bank. I'm going to train my classification. I'm going to say to Abby, use what you know to work out what's what, and then I'd simply come back, and it's going to typically go slow because it's a presentation. But that would just allow Abby from that point forward, right now in the mailroom, if I hit save, then that would immediately recognize all those documents as being bank statements from here on in. I'm going to cancel that because it's taking too long for us to wait. Is actually going through a backlog of 18 documents, and I happen to know that one of those documents is absolutely enormous. I'm going to load up another copy of this for a moment because I think one of the most exciting advances in a mailroom in recent years has been in this content classification. If I were to similarly open up a folder full of letters, and if I did it the right way around, I'm sorry people, there we go. These are the same letters that you saw earlier on, same complaint letters, and if I were to pick on, for instance, a letter of thanks and call it letter positive, I'm just going to very quickly demonstrate that if I say letter positive. I'm simply going to add my examples of letter positive into letter positive, and I'm going to train my classification, which is extremely quick, as fast as the other one should have been. If I go back now and I were to classify these documents, at the moment the need for human input and the need for our skills is in recognizing that actually it believes 100% that this is a positive letter because of the positive terms that it's found that are used in other positive letters. But actually, because we threw a lease document in and a supporting document and a memorandum of sale, these are all terms that crop up over and over again. So we would still refine this with you, and this is the value of humans, to say that simply saying "Dear Sirs" and "yours sincerely" is not enough for me to think this is a positive letter. But you can see from this that actually we've worked out the likelihood, it's never black and white, but we've worked out the likelihood of each of these types of documents being one of the others in your business. And if we were to do that with a complaint letter, we'd find very similar results, only people tend to use the word disgusted a little less. And a change of address letter, I think we get 100% hit. If I just do that very, very quickly, change of address. I'm simply going to add these into my change of address training, train Abby again, and come back here before classifying those documents. Now there's a great example of the clarity that Abby can have, because I'm writing to inform you that we have moved. My previous address was, it's 99.1% sure that that document is a change of address, and it's marked it in green because it's been told if you're sufficiently different to the next most likely thing, then move on with it. And again, and again. So what I've hoped that I've given you a small flavour of is that in a mailroom environment, we can use a whole set of tools to help computers to deliver mediocre, trivial tasks in a very automated way and give back the power to your staff to get on and do something that they're better able to do. If it's a case handling department, we might take an hour's work and make it 10 minutes. For invoice processing, the last client that we installed this to took 3 days work and did it in an hour to 2 hours each week. So what we want to try and do with you is to make sure you understand that digital mailroom is not just about a scan to email solution. It's about revolutionizing the way you deal with paper process in your business, and it's about taking that process, automating it, and giving back your staff the more interesting and valuable job that you paid them to do. Thank you. Sally, I'm going to call on you.
Okay. We haven't been asked any questions. If anybody would like to ask a question now, please feel free via the control panel. Alternatively, we will send a quick follow-up after I close the webinar, and you'd be welcome to contact us via reply email. Okay, well, it looks like, Jeremy, you've obviously been very clear, and nobody seems to be raising a hand or asking a question. So we will wrap it up there. Thanks for your time this morning, everybody, and do feel free to get in touch if there's anything else you would like to discuss in a bit more detail.